See how he chose me first, Brendan?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have 3 guests on today for a rookie mock draft with some new mock draft landing spots based upon the recent mock by Mel Kiper and Field Yates. We're just going to go ahead and hop right into it, but we do have a couple of new guests, a couple of good friends of mine, Brett and Brendan. Brett, do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, let me get this glare out of here. Not bad.
You're good.
And yeah, Ned, longtime college buddy, and excited to be on here and talk some fantasy football. Dynasty is something I've been doing for about, I don't know, 7, 8 years now. So it's a fun one. I prefer Dynasty to redraft. Feels like you can get, you can kind of choose all these different ways to go about strategizing winning. So it's big kind of outlet for me to just kind of, take a break from reality of life and have some fun with fantasy football and talk some crap to your friends, right?
I love it. Brendan, how about you?
Yeah, also college buddy. I'm the one person taller than Sean. I'm not sure if you've seen him stand up, but got a couple inches on him, so that's really a big bragging point for me. Been doing Dynasty a little bit less than Brett. I think I joined his league 2 years in, took over an orphan team, and led it to 3 straight 101 picks, which was pretty impressive. It really didn't start well, but love Dynasty, keeps you engaged in the off season, and yeah, I mean it's shown. Reigning champ of my home league this year, so applause. Everyone listening that might know, but yeah, excited to be on and excited to walk through this draft.
Yeah, I love to hear it. And Arjun, thank you so much for coming back. You're one of the first guests to be on an episode with me. So thank you so much for coming back. Hopefully you guys will keep yourselves well behaved, and I can invite you all back in the future. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and hop right into it. So we got 4 of us here. We're each going to take turns making a pick. We're going to go left to right. So I'll start first, pass it off to Brett, Brendan, then Arjun. Then we'll circle back around. And yeah, I'll go ahead and hop right into it. So once again, this is a super flex 12 team full PPR. We're only going to do the first 2 rounds. Mock draft is on the left side of potential landing spots following the NFL draft. This will certainly change here in less than a week. But it's a really good exercise to have an idea of where these guys are slotted to go or mocked to go, and we'll go from there. So with the 101, I think it's pretty straightforward whether it is you're in a super flex or a 1 quarterback league. It does feel like Ashton Jeanty is that guy. Don't really care if he goes to the Raiders. Would love to see him go to the Bears or the Broncos, maybe a slightly better landing spot. But I think this is a pretty safe pick here at 101. I don't believe this is going to be an argument. So I will pass it right off. Brett, what are you feeling at 102?
Yeah, 102. So, I mean, looking at this board that you've supplied us, we got Travis Hunter being drafted as a wide receiver. The Browns probably puts him at the favorite at 102. There's the whole debate of cornerback versus wide receiver. I mean, I feel like if the Browns say he's going to be a wide receiver, Travis Hunter says he wants to play both ways, it's hard not to go that way. But, I do think Dynasty is a little bit of, strategic, right? So especially for Superflex, we got Cam Ward as the QB at pick 1. I'm not against taking him at pick 2 here because you're probably getting an entire rookie contract or at least 2-3 years of a starting QB. And then we got, the other option considers probably Omarion Hampton at, what pick is that, 20 to the Broncos. So that you're getting, Omarion Hampton to the Broncos, you're probably looking at pre-draft rankings of, a Dynasty RB1 right there. I feel like those are the 3 I would consider here. That being said, just me being me, I got to go Travis Hunter. I just feel like in a vacuum, you're getting a decade worth of a elite athlete at wide receiver. Cam Ward, stud QB. No issue with taking him here for Superflex. Same thing with Omarion Hampton at 20 to the Broncos. Feels like they're locking him in for their workhorse running back if they take him there. All that being said, though, Travis Hunter, that's my pick. Lock it in. I'll pass it on. I don't know if it's Brendan or Arjun, but they definitely aren't making a better pick than that.
Yeah, we're going to pass this over to Brendan. The Browns have definitely come out and said that Hunter would be a full-time wide receiver, and I think Ward and Hampton that you mentioned are the likely other picks here. But yeah, Brendan, what are your thoughts on that pick?
Yeah, I mean, I know the situation's super nuanced with Hunter. I'm curious where you think he goes if he gets drafted as a cornerback or the situation is a little bit murkier. Personally, and I know Brett likes this approach too. I feel like in general, in a rookie draft, you're taking risks with every pick. So I'm going to go for upside, almost across the board. So for me, I'm kind of looking in like the 105 range, kind of after the three big backs are off the board, and maybe after T-Mac. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about Travis Hunter if he comes out as a cornerback, say the Giants or somewhere else.
I feel like if a team says he's a cornerback, like you can't take Travis Hunter in the first like 8 picks. I feel like it's just not. I know we're all about the risk and the upside, but like if a team clearly says he's got to be cornerback, if it's gray area, I'm with you. Where I feel like number 5 pick after kind of it feels like ignoring kind of the way we have this draft playing out. There's 3 big running backs. There's a few good receivers, and there's a few QBs that would all be in the mix, along with I guess the tight ends too. But I'm not touching Travis Hunter if a team says he is a cornerback with a top 7-8 pick in Superflex for the first round.
Yeah, I think if a team especially says anything that he's going to play a full-time cornerback and slot in with a couple of packages at wide receiver, he would certainly be scared away. There's a lot of really top talent in the first 12 or 14 picks here. And you brought up T-Mac. We actually have him here as the 4th wide receiver off the board. Matthew Golden's really sliding up. Egbuka going 22 to the Chargers would be a home run pick. So it's really tough, but I do like the running backs. So I would say that you brought it up earlier. I think Hampton and Cam Ward would really be the only other options, unless you really fall in love with, once again, another one of these guys. Like you just love the situation with Golden to the Cowboys or Egbuka to the Chargers, has the potential to be the wide receiver 1.
It does feel like, to Brendan's point though, before the draft happens, you should have like a sense in your head of how far are you willing to reach for Travis Hunter if he's not clearly a wide receiver according to the team. Because that's going to be a hard decision to make. No one has had this decision in the past 15 years. When was the last time we had a 2-way player, right? For when it comes to dynasty football, it just doesn't really come around that often. Not since we've been playing fantasy football at all.
Yeah. Brendan, go for it.
No, it's just interesting too because there's a whole spectrum, right? There's a team saying he's going to be a full-time cornerback and we're going to put him in some high leverage red zone situations, which honestly isn't the worst situation, right? Like he's getting all high value touches. Or there's even a team saying he's drafted as a cornerback because it's a little bit easier to bring a wide receiver in on offensive packages than kind of have a wide receiver that plays on the defensive end, and he ends up playing both ways, or again playing say 50% of offensive snaps, but they're all really high importance, non-blocking. He's the number 1 read snaps. So I think if I get any sense of that being the case, I'm willing to pull the trigger early. But again, it's personal risk and kind of how you wanna play your rookie draft. So
it's certainly safest to invest in wide receivers in Dynasty. So it makes sense. Before we move on, and Brendan, your pick, because the controversy around Hunter is very wide right now. Mr. Arjun, do you have any thoughts before we move on from this topic?
I was just trying to think about the big risk plays, even in redraft, going back a couple years, and you see stuff on both sides where you think about like Rashee Rice last year, and it's like Willie Woney gets suspended, and the folks that draft him for those first 4 or 5 weeks, he was a huge boom player. And then you go back to like Le'Veon Bell, when he's in his contract battle, and a bunch of people got burned because they took him 1.02 in redraft. The thing with Dynasty is you're paying for this not just this year, but you're paying for this for the next 5 to 10. So I would have honestly the opposite approach to Brendan in that I just don't think the boom is really there like it is in a redraft league.
It depends. I mean, depends on teams too. To chime in on one last thing, like if your team is garbage, right? You're more incentivized to just take the upside. You know, if your team is like right there and all you need is like a stud running back, you know, like it makes more sense to take the stud running back and fill that final hole to make your championship contender. So I do think, you know, it's like Brendan said, it's a nuanced pick and a lot of factors. But I feel what you're saying, Arjun. I think the Le'Veon Bell is a great example where, you know, it was really like swing for the fences and you either get crushed or you crush it, right?
Yeah.
Brandon, now you're all good. I'm going to pass it off to you here really quick for the 103. But yeah, so much of rookie mock drafts is about team structure. Are you a quarterback away? Are you a running back away? So that'll certainly come up a lot here. But Brendan, let me get your final thoughts on Travis Hunter, and then let's move on to the 103.
Final thoughts is just going back and looking at, you know, the kind of, and I'm definitely not, if he gets drafted as a cornerback, I'm not saying you take him at the 102. That would be a bit crazy and a bit high, but in that like 5-6 range and kind of by the board spending up on him a little bit, like just going back at some of the picks that have been in that range over the last like 5 years, you've got like Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas was also there, so that's a hit. You've got like Addison, Johnston, Flowers, like those are all pretty mediocre pieces right now, I feel like. You've got Treylon Burks, Brett's boy, James Williams, who hit the kickoff, but like he's good now. Chris Olave, Sky Moore, like there's really just like I think that those picks sometimes the safeness of them gets overvalued in my opinion, and I would rather take a risk and try to get a difference maker in that range. So it's my last point.
The clocks ran out.
Yeah, my clock's ticking. I'm not a quarterback guy in Superflex. I usually will try to trade out I took Jayden Daniels last year, so I guess that's not necessarily the best example, but typically I like to trade out of those quarterbacks because I feel like they're a little bit overvalued, and I feel like you can always spend the future one to get someone who will make a difference, kind of for your team, like a Jared Goff type player. I think I really like Hampton's landing spot. To be honest, Hampton and TreVeyon are kind of like even to me, and I do love TreVeyon's upside with his just kind of Jahmyr Gibbs-esque profile. But Hampton at the Broncos landing spot with a first round pick to me is really just a win here. With T-Mac falling kind of to the fourth, he'd be my number one wide receiver. But with him falling all the way down, I don't think that as the third wide receiver off the board, I don't think I would take him here. And I guess Cam Ward's the only one in consideration from a quarterback standpoint. But like I said, I like to wait a little bit on quarterbacks in these drafts, and I'd rather take positional pieces. That's also kind of just, I have more fun with wide receivers and running backs and quarterbacks. So I would think I'd go Hampton here.
Yeah, I like that. Once again, one of the second RB off the board. I think the Broncos is one of the top landing spots that we would get really excited about in that Sean Payton offense. Someone that right now would be the workhorse. They don't have much. I think Audric Estime, who they picked last year, didn't really show too much. Jaleel McLaughlin is still there. They let go of Javonte Williams, so there is a huge opening, and this is such a strong running back class. We've heard a lot about Hampton this offseason as being the RB2 or the RB3, depending upon people's rankings, depending upon where you have TreVeyon Henderson. But seeing him almost 20 picks later, I think I would just be leaning on draft capital and just a really top landing spot. So I'm going to keep this going. So Arjun, do you have any thoughts on the Hampton pick? How does that make you feel about picking at 104? And who are you thinking?
Well, I think Brendan's nuts. If I'm top of the draft, I'm taking the quarterback if I can get a 12-year guy. Running back, best case is like 6-7 years of really good production, unless you get just a true freak of nature, which I think like Jeanty has the chance to be. But no, I'm taking Cam Ward. The nice thing about the Titans is their offensive line really improved last year, which is the thing that murders young quarterbacks. And the fact that he's coming in with a couple years experience in college, I think he'll be really good right off the bat.
Yeah, I like that pick, especially because a lot of mock drafts, and we even have here, have the Titans taking a wide receiver early in the second round. So it's unlikely that they go into the season with only Calvin Ridley and Treylon Burks. Although according to Cam Ward and his recent Twitch stream, those are the two of the top 4 wide receivers in the league, whatever you want to believe. But Jayden Higgins would be another great weapon. I'd probably have Luther Burden as a better fit, but that's not what we have mocked here. But it would be exciting just to have another weapon in that room. Chiga Okonkwo, if you've been playing Dynasty, you've definitely heard that name. But I'm going to go ahead and keep this going at the 105. I think, once again, if the Browns do come out and say that Travis Hunter is a full-time wide receiver, I think these are likely to be the top 4 picks. You could see TreVeyon Henderson slide in there depending upon the landing spot. And in your pre-draft rankings, I just think this running back class is so strong. Haven't really been sold on Matthew Golden and even T-Mac to the Texans. Those feel like a lot of wide receiver 2 landing spots. Feels like Egbuka to the Chargers really is the only one with potential to be the wide receiver 1, but Ladd McConkey really showed out as a rookie. So a lot of murky landing spots for the wide receivers here. Probably a little early for me to take a tight end, even if it is a position of need. I just feel like there is much stronger talent still on the board. But I'm going to go ahead and keep this going with TreVeyon Henderson to the Bears at 105. Once again, I just love the talent. I love the Ben Johnson offense. Really an explosive running back, a guy that can take the top off the defense. Kind of has that Jahmyr Gibbs comp. I think, Brendan, you mentioned that earlier. But I'm going to pass this right over to Brett. Brett, what are your thoughts? You took Travis Hunter at the 102. You saw 3 studs get taken immediately after. Are you regretting that decision? How are you feeling? Certainly don't draft with the intention of building one big team, but what are your thoughts on how the draft has played out so far?
I feel like it's fair. I don't know. TreVeyon Henderson, I'm with everyone on the talent. If he goes to the Bears, don't get me wrong, he's better than DeAndre Swift, but I think they're like similar skill set in the sense they're like pass catching explosive players. I don't really get that pick, and I'd be worried that it wouldn't be the best fit for TreVeyon as opposed to if he were to go to, a team like the Broncos, the Chargers, the Cowboys. Like there's so many great teams for him to land on, to where I feel like TreVeyon could even jump Omarion Hampton, like Brendan was saying. I don't hate him at 5, but solid pick. I would probably go with, if I'm looking at the board, I think I would go with Tetairoa McMillan. I know. All right, I guess Emeka Egbuka. I think he actually is maybe a better player than Ladd McConkey, and he has a chance to fight to be the 1 on that team if he did get drafted by the Chargers. I think Tet does not have a chance to be the 1 on the Texans, but I think with wide receiver, you got to take the best talent. And Tet was just so dominant in college. I feel like people are overthinking how the modern NFL is so much more about separation and route running, and they don't really value like these big dominant receivers as much anymore. I think Tet is an outlier. I view him similar to Drake London. I know that's kind of an easy cop-out comp, but it took Drake London a few years to get going, and now Drake London is kind of untouchable as like a wide receiver dynasty 1. So I'm taking Tet here, and I think that's kind of a no-brainer at 6.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Drake London concerns, or especially the QB concerns early in the career, I think, Desmond Ridder was his rookie quarterback, or maybe was it Tyler Heineke or Taylor Heineke back then? It feels like so long ago, and he's been in the league for a while. And then even Kirk, what's left of him last year, and he really showed some flashes. And Michael Penix was something like a 30 or 40% target share the last couple of games of the season. So I think everybody's really excited about Drake London going into this year, and that has been one of the big names comped to McMillan. Brendan, you're on the board at 107. How are you feeling about how these last couple picks and have played out in the McMillan pick?
I was really hoping I had a pipe dream that TreVeyon would fall, but that really wasn't going to happen. I think Tet McMillan's interesting. How do you guys feel about CJ Stroud? Do you think what CJ Stroud do you think we have for the next 5 years? Do you think we have his rookie year, or do you think we have last year?
Yeah, Arjun, do you want to
Yeah,
take
I
that
feel
one?
like it's gonna...
I was about to say I'm uniquely positioned to answer that one because in our league I traded away CJ Stroud after his rookie year.
Oh, that's
He's going to be a great quarterback and a potential Pro Bowler of every year, but he's not going to be the next Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen type. It's hard to reach that ceiling, and while he does have it, I just don't think he's going to get all the way there.
Yeah,
He
Brandon.
can support 2 wide receiver ones though. That's the thing. Like he has that capability. He's a pocket passer, and he just had a horrible offensive line. And yeah, if the board goes how we're seeing it here, and Tech goes to the Texans, it might be a rough rookie season if the O-line, if they don't invest in that, and the line gets even worse with how they trade away Tunzel. I can see how it gets rocky, but he's still a great QB from a passing potential. There aren't that many great QBs in the NFL, and I'd say he could support 2 wide receiver ones. I think that's doable. Think like Joe Burrow-esque.
And I would agree with that. I think Stroud's value is really taking a hit. I mean, after his rookie year, he was a top 5 dynasty quarterback. I want to say now he's outside the top 10. I want to say he's around quarterback 12 or 15, and even if you're playing best ball on underdog, I believe he's around quarterback 17 or 18. So I think he's swung too far in the other direction. But I certainly think he has the potential to be a lot stronger quarterback, as I mentioned, than what the comparison that we made for Drake London, and he's had to play with Desmond Ridder or what's left of Kirk Cousins. CJ Stroud is better than all those guys. So I certainly have faith that McMillan can produce as early as his rookie year.
Yeah, and I like him coming in as a 2. I think that's a better position for him. I think that coming in as an alpha, kind of like Drake London was supposed to, right? Like that's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie, especially someone who is bigger and not one of those, super dominators like a Jamar Chase.
Is he going to be the 2 though? Is he going to?
Nico?
I mean, he could be.
I
that's
think
a crowded wide receiver.
Yeah.
Nico
Not
Collins
really.
and Christian Kirk. I mean, Christian Kirk, I think, slots into the slot role. That's kind of where he's meant to be. Tank Dell's out the entire 2025 season with his injury. Nico Collins is a top 5, I think. Actually, that's probably a little generous. Probably a top 8 dynasty wide receiver. You could safely say top 10. But even 2 years ago, Nico Collins was somebody you could have gotten for a second round pick before CJ Stroud came in and kind of saved his career. Yeah.
If you look at Nico and just how he demands targets, I mean, he's a 1. Like he's through and through just a absolute animal out there. So.
Well, Brendan, you were on the clock at 107, so this was a great discussion of Tet McMillan. I think a lot of people's kind of top wide receiver, especially right after the college season ended. But who are you thinking here at 107?
So I think for me, I don't think that I think there's a tier break, especially with kind of how the draft shook out, where I'm not necessarily ready to go grab Judkins at running back. Definitely not ready to dip on quarterback, especially given that I wouldn't take Ward. So here, I think it's between Egbuka and Golden and actually dipping into tight end land. And I think that I'm probably going to go with Tyler Warren here. I told myself I wouldn't draft a first-round rookie tight end after I made the 101 mistake on Kyle Pitts a few years back. But here we go. At least it's only the 107. I think, getting a difference maker at that position is huge. And at this point, middle first round, everybody's a risk. Might as well take someone who really, really looks like a difference maker at the position and is going to a place where he's going to be linked up with a strong rookie for years to come. So.
Yeah, I do think this is the spot where you're going to start to see the tight ends go off the board, once again, depending upon what your current team structure is. Say you had Travis Kelce and that was the only tight end, you're certainly probably more willing to reach than if you have a top 5 or top 6 dynasty tight end and a Hawkinson, McBride, Bowers, those guys. But if you have one of those middle tier tight ends and you don't love any of these wide receivers and you don't want to reach on Judkins, Warren is described as kind of a pretty safe pick. Not quite the ceiling that we saw in a Bowers, but the Bears at 10 is great draft capital, so no argument there. Personally, I think the only other player that I would be considering would be the quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, especially if we get word recently that Derek Carr is going to miss the whole season. I like Sanders' upside, still has Chris Olave, although he's one concussion away from maybe ending his career. But once again, it just really goes back to how you're feeling about those wide receivers, because none of them really have great landing spots, and a lot of them feel kind of slotted in to be the wide receiver too with their current landing spots. But Arjun, let me pass it off to you since you have the 108. What are your thoughts on Tyler Warren? Are you pretty happy with maybe somebody falling to you at the 108?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The number one rookie tight end has kind of spoiled us these last 2 years. So the old thought process was tight ends would take 2 to 3 years to really develop into an NFL system, and that's when you would see them produce. But with Laporta 2 years ago and Bowers last year, the rookie tight end one has been at the top or next to the top of.
I feel like we need to talk about this because Laporta was not the number one tight end 2 years ago.
He was not. It was Dalton Kincaid.
But if you look at the historical drafts of first round tight ends, they are not that much better from second or third round tight ends from a fantasy perspective. So the reason I shake my head at this pick from Brendan is because sure, maybe he's the next Travis Kelce, but chances are he isn't, and chances are just as good that someone in the second or third round is going to be better than Tyler Warren. And it's I get you have to credit him for what he did at Penn State this year, and he was a beast. But sorry, I'm not trying to hijack you, but the Laporta comp, that he was a second, third round rookie pick. He was picked after Michael Mayer. He was picked after Dalton Kincaid. You look at all the first round tight end picks, it was Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, who are other ones, Hawkinson, Fance, all these guys, they're mediocre tight ends. They aren't difference makers in fantasy. So it's just, I don't know. This happens every year where I feel like a tight end gets hyped up in the first round. And yes, Brock Bowers was 101. Brock Bowers was a better wide receiver than Ladd McConkey, just statistically at Georgia. He, in my opinion, was a different animal. But in general, it's not a thing. Look at Trey McBride. I got Trey McBride, I think, in the third round of our rookie draft that the league Brendan, Sanford, and I are in. So it's just, you're better off Don Kincaid or Tucker Kraft. Who would you rather have in Dynasty now? In all seriousness. It just, I feel like any tight end drafted this high, go get your guy. I'm all for that in Dynasty, but it's opportunity cost. You have the same ability, you don't have the ability to get a stud running back or receiver in the third or fourth round. You do have that ability in tight end.
No, I was going to say that's a fair point. The reason I'm doing it is really opportunity cost, like you mentioned. I don't like anyone in this tier at the other positions. Egbuka, like you said, he's going to be a great wide receiver, right? But we have a mock going to the Chargers, and Ladd McConkey was literally the same deal coming out. And Ladd's done it. I don't know if he's going to take too much there, and he could just be a Christian Kirk. And then, Golden, I just feel like got a lot of speed. Don't love going to the Cowboys. I like the draft capital, but I just don't see anyone here. And a lot of the first round wide receivers you see, to be honest, like kind of flame out too and are pretty mediocre, and don't do what you want them to do. So that's why I think that I just don't see anyone that has the upside of a potential difference making tight end here. So that's my reason for Warren. But I agree with you in theory, Brett, that like I think these tight ends get mocked all the way up, hence why I took Kyle Pitts with the biggest flop in history in that draft, though.
All right, Arjun, you're still on the clock at 108. Let me get your final thoughts and who you're thinking of taking.
No, I love this discussion. I'll just throw in, even you talk about Tucker Kraft. I mean, he was drafted behind Musgrave.
Yeah.
So
I look at Mandrews was drafted behind what's his name? The first round, Hayden Hurst.
That's right.
Hayden Hurst was drafted in the first round, and Mark Andrews was like in the third round. Like if you look at the past decade, I feel like you would be shocked at the hit rate of second or third round rookie tight ends versus first round tight ends.
I 100% agree. And for 108, I'm actually going to go to Matthew Golden. I agree with the general sentiment that none of these wide receivers is in a great room. Him versus Egbuka is honestly more about system than anything. I think the Cowboys are much more willing to throw than the Chargers. And I think Dak coming back could support at least a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2. I don't think he's supporting 2 wide receiver 1s, but at least that gives you a bit of a ceiling in that offense. Where the Chargers, they just don't throw it enough. As talented as that team is, they just like to run the ball.
Yeah, that's true. And Golden's really interesting. If you've been following along with Dynasty the offseason the last couple of months, he's someone that was almost, I don't want to say that he was unheard of, but Isaiah Bond was actually the wide receiver that a lot of people liked towards the end of the college season, and it wasn't until Matthew Golden broke out the last couple games of the college football playoffs and then absolutely showed out at the combine running a 4.29, the fastest in his class, that he's absolutely skyrocketed up the board. But yeah, can Dak Prescott support 2 wide receivers? Because I certainly don't think Golden's going to surpass CeeDee Lamb. We mentioned earlier Tetairoa McMillan over Nico Collins, Egbuka, and Ladd, and even some of these other wide receivers in the second round. So probably still drafting on draft capital, the safety net of a wide receiver. It's much more safer to invest in a wide receiver long term than, say, another tight end or now we're getting into the back half of the second round, early third round running back. So I like that pick, and I'm just going to go ahead and keep us going before we get into another long-winded discussion here. And Brett and Brendan, I'll let you guys circle back on these picks when I get to you. I think at 109, you really have to start considering these quarterbacks, whether it's Shedeur Sanders to the Saints or even Jaxson Dart and Tyler Shuck to the Browns and Giants, respectively. The idea that Jaxson Dart gets to throw to Travis Hunter as his wide receiver 1. I mean, now we're mocking Travis Hunter to Dart. The Browns trade up to the 29th overall pick would get a lot of people excited, and Tyler Shuck having Malik Neighbors to throw the ball to is really excited. That is a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, and a lot of people, even with his age, have the question, is he the number 1 dynasty wide receiver above Chase and Jefferson? I think there's a 5-year age gap there. But just simply going off of draft capital, I would still be leaning Shedeur Sanders here at 109, not only draft capital, but the talent. I have Sanders as my quarterback 2 in this draft class. So at 109, I'm going to go Sanders throwing to Chris Olave. It's likely that the Saints would come back and grab an additional weapon. We have him targeting Tre Harris at the end of the third, just another big body wide receiver, another target to kind of just go ahead and chuck it up to like he did in college to Travis Hunter a lot. So this being a super flex draft, it's really hard to, when you're at the back of the first, and we're going to see some guys fall to the early second round, to pass up on these quarterbacks, which do feel a lot safer, and they're often given a much longer leash when the draft capital is there, having a couple years to see what they can do. So Brett at 110, what are your thoughts on the last couple of picks and what you have here on the clock?
All right, so last few picks, I feel like if Matthew Golden's drafted at 12 to the Cowboys, you got to respect how they reached so high, and he's clearly part of their plan. I don't hate that at all. And I think this is where I honestly think this draft class is kind of strong at the back end of the first year. It feels like probably every year we talk up how like there is some depth and we talk ourselves into players and whatnot. I like Shedeur Sanders. I'm a Sanders guy. I like the way he kind of has that confidence. I think that's needed in a QB. I like the landing spot with the Saints. So I think that's a good pick. I probably would have taken Sanders at 10 easily if he fell to me. I feel like maybe Golden. I don't know. Golden, I see the upside. I think right now I would probably take Egbuka above Golden, and then I'm going to throw out my guy Quinshon Judkins. I think he's probably the fourth best running back in the class, but I think he has the best landing spot out of any running back. Like, I think better than Jeanty, better than Hampton, better than TreVeyon. I think if Judkins goes to the Chargers, you're talking like a true workhorse, like RB1 for a rookie contract. It's hard because I've taken two receivers already in Hunter and McMillan, but I feel like in a vacuum, I think I'm gonna take Egbuka here at 10. I just think he's someone that, as I've kind of dug in a little bit more for Dynasty prep season, I like his game. I think he fits the modern NFL well to kind of counter what I was just saying before about how I think Tech kind of slips because he doesn't really fit that kind of shifty receiver that can be moved multiple ways and gets good separation, does a lot of good things right. I think Egbuka does fit that. I think a lot of teams will fall in love with him for that. And I think Ladd is a great NFL player. Do I think he's a top tier wide receiver one? I do not. I think Egbuka has a chance to jump him and be the number one target for Justin Herbert. You're talking about a guy who's played behind. I think he was there the same time that JSN, Olave, and Wilson were all there. And then obviously he was there when Marv was there. And, this past year he was there when Jeremiah Smith was there. So it's like, put this dude in a Georgia uniform. Is this guy putting up numbers like that are way better? Maybe. I like Egbuka. I think it would be between Egbuka and Judkins here. And I think I got to, in a vacuum, take the receiver just because – receivers, I think he still has wide receiver 10 to 15 upside with Egbuka, and I think you're looking at someone that can be in the NFL for a decade, right?
No, that makes you bring up a good point. I mean, almost 30 picks of draft capital between them, first round wide receiver over a second round running back to the same team. I don't blame you for leaning the wide receiver in. So Egbuka and Ladd seem very similar type players, just very pure route runners. But yeah, which one of them takes the step as the wide receiver one, the wide receiver two? We all think the Chargers is a run first offense, but Ladd did pretty good in a run first offense last year. Didn't have a lot of competition for targets with Quinton Johnston, and I don't know if Josh Palmer was still there off the top of my head. I know he just signed with the Bills. Was he still there last year? So. No, I think you brought up a couple of really good points. Brendan, you're on the clock at 111. I have to imagine you're smiling that Judkins fell to you, but what are your thoughts?
I was happy with this spot because Brett got to make the decision for me. But pretty much everything Brett's saying is what my decision process would have been there, and kind of the reason I don't really have to make a decision here. It's very clearly Judkins is probably going to be a workhorse with the Chargers. You love the landing spot, you love the system, you love just a good offense that he can go and step right into with a quarterback that's going to be there for a while. This is a group that's committed to running. I mean, look what they did with Dobbins last year, and he was arguably running on one leg for half the year. So that's really exciting. I think Egbuka is a great out. I was actually, Brett, you mentioned something about kind of who he's played with. So I went back and looked at his stats because I was curious. He almost, in 2022, I believe, or 2023, I forget which one I was looking at, but he almost beat Marvin receiving yards on that team with Marv and JSN. So he is a stud, and I think he's going to be a great NFL wide receiver. I personally really like Lad, so I think it's just a hard comparison between the two. But he would be the clear pick if you went Judkins, for sure. So
yeah,
to speak on Lad,
go for it,
Sanford. I do get concerned with Lad's size. I know we've seen in the past decade kind of a shift to the NFL moving to these super small shifty receivers, but when they're like stick thin. Like I look at the Olaves, the Tank Dells, like I'm just kind of like, are we starting to see like a repetitive case of these guys getting injured a lot? And I do worry about that with Lad. Egbuka, he's a little stockier. I think he's, what is he, like 6'1", 210 or something? I don't know. He's maybe I'm off on that honestly.
6'1", 205.
Pretty
yeah,
close.
right, there we go. Like so, he's got a little bit. Got a little bit of size compared to the modern receiver, and Lad, he's explosive. He's quick. Like I think it was last year. Like his stats were like identical to Garrett Wilson coming into the draft, right? Like the dude can move, but I do have concerns about his size, and I think Egbuka. Like, upside for Egbuka, I think is like a Amon-Ra type of guy. Like he's someone that, like, he's a good blocker. He's someone that is clearly okay not being the focal point of an offense, right? So I think he's slipping a little bit here, and I understand why, because of the players he's played with.
And just really quick, my thoughts on Egbuka is in the pre-draft process, he's often described as the safest of the wide receivers, where he has the highest floor. Compared to Matthew Golden and Ted McMillan, who we were talking about earlier, and certainly you could include Travis Hunter in this or not, but a lot of them have higher ceilings. We talked about McMillan being a Drake London comp and Matthew Golden being the fastest guy and all of that. Egbuka's floor really does seem like a wide receiver too. Top 24 wide receiver year in and year out, a much safer pick. So no, I definitely agree with a lot of the things that you guys are saying there. I want to pass this over to Mr. Arjun at the 112. Still a couple guys on the board. I'll talk with my next pick about we're approaching a tier break. But what are your thoughts at the 112?
This is gonna be my real break from, I feel like, the consensus, and this is purely based on quarterback situations as we see them now. Obviously, if Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, things change in the short term, but he's also not going to be there for very long. So I think I have to go Jalen Milroe here as a complete gamble on a quarterback with a lot of talent and a running floor. Yeah, seriously. No, but we talk about running quarterbacks as like the new wave of the NFL.
Arjun's just being a homer. He's a Steelers fan.
I was going to say, this is aggressive to pass on two quarterbacks taking almost 50 picks ahead of them, 40 picks ahead of them in Dart.
Well, I refuse. I mean, as much as I don't like the Browns, I think picking Browns quarterbacks has been a really losing game over the past 25 years. And I don't know enough about Show besides the fact that he put up some stats at Louisville. So yeah, it's Jalen Milroe. It would be excited to see him as a runner and a thrower.
Okay. That is not what I would have expected. Jalen Milroe, a lot of people think, has a really high ceiling, the most athletic quarterback. I think he's actually projected to be faster than Lamar Jackson, like the fastest quarterback when he comes into the draft. But draft capital would scare me away. But certainly the uncertainty around the Rodgers situation, depending upon when you're doing your rookie picks, if you have a couple of, or your rookie drafts, if you have a couple of weeks after the NFL draft until you do your rookie draft and things play out, and it seems like Milroe only has to beat out Mason Rudolph for that starting position, that gives me a lot of upside, or gives me a lot of hype. DK Metcalf, George Pickens, we have taken the Ollie Gordon in the fourth for the running back. They also have Jaylen Warren, so a lot of weapons. And with it being a run first offense, with what's the offensive coordinator's name? is it Arthur?
Arthur Smith.
Arthur Smith.
Yeah, Arthur Smith.
That's
And
Brendan's best friend.
makes you a little nervous for the wide receivers, but we saw that the conversations were that Arthur Smith actually really wanted to keep Justin Fields as the starter. If you remember, partway through the season, Fields was 4-2 when they switched over to Russell Wilson, and I believe that was a Mike Tomlin and maybe even an the owners got involved. So I do think that Jalen Milroe fits that scheme really well. But personally, I think that's a little early, passing on a couple of quarterbacks with much better draft capital and possibly some more pass-happy offenses.
Sorry, Sanford. I really like this pick, Arjun, because I think personally, the Steelers. So I look at the other organizations that these quarterbacks are being drafted to, similar to what you say. Like, they just burn through quarterbacks. No one stays. Like, they destroy their quarterbacks. Like, how many quarterbacks have the Browns been through? You know, to me, like, the Steelers are going to be at least 500. You know that Mike Tomlin is going to take them to a winning season, and you know he's going to set his team up to succeed. You match that with the upside that Milroe provides as a runner in a system that you know is going to be built so that he succeeds. I don't know. I don't hate it. He was honestly probably going to be the only quarterback I would have taken, because I would have taken him probably a little above value versus the other ones in the first round that I think get blown up a little bit. So
I'll say Justin Fields was like a QB2 level performer for the Steelers the first couple of weeks of the season, which it's not the thing that you're reaching for. It's not what you hope he's going to be for his whole career.
Well,
for at least it's a proven.
Wasn't Fields from a fantasy sense like a top 10 guy? No, I remember.
No, he was like QB 10 to.
Not with the Steelers. He hasn't been putting up those numbers since year 1 or year 2 with the Bears. I think that was almost 3 years ago now. Even the year after with the Bears, he was struggling when he got hurt. So, but this definitely is an upside pick.
I mean, to be honest, like, would you trade a late first for Jared Goff, or for like Kirk Cousins a couple of years ago, or for any of these other quarterback twos? Because I think you get that trade done always. Mm-hmm. Like, so if you can get a guy that is going to be in a system where he might be a quarterback too with rushing upside, I don't know. I don't hate it, Arjun. It's definitely a reach, but I don't hate it.
Okay, well, with that, I am back on the clock at 2:01. What I was going to say is we're approaching, I think, a pretty solid tier break. Personally, there was, 5 running backs. We're going to talk about Kaleb Johnson here in the next couple of picks. 5 wide receivers. We still have Luther Burden on the board, although we actually have him mocked being taken after Jayden Higgins. Colston Loveland is still on the board. I think those are the 3 guys that I would be between here at the 201s. Once again, Loveland, Burden, or Kaleb Johnson. Really tough. We can talk about those quarterbacks with it being a super flex draft. We have been talking about them for a while, and you guys brought up some really good points about the uncertainty in the Browns offense and the Giants offense. They do seem to just kind of churn and burn through the quarterbacks. Now, Arjun, you brought up that you don't know too much about Tyler Shuck. He is a older quarterback. I believe he's going to be 26 when the season starts. They don't have his age here, but he profiles as just a big body quarterback. He played in a system that developed really well, and is someone that I think in the last couple of months, as people are watching that film, people are really excited about, and would not be surprised to see him as an early day 2 pick. And once again, the idea of him throwing to Malik Neighbors is pretty exciting. So I'm definitely at 201. Brought up Loveland. I think I would pass on Loveland based upon who I have on the board. Luther Burden, Kaleb Johnson, and then either one of those 2 quarterbacks would be probably who I'm looking at. I mentioned before a lot of your picks would be on team need. So if you feel like you're a quarterback away, you feel like you're a running back away, I'm going to swing for the fences here. Not sure if this would be my pick when I'm on the clock and I have a whole day or 6 or 7 hours to break down the pick, but I'm going to go Kaleb Johnson to the Commanders. Just going off of my pre-draft rankings, he is my RB5, I would have Skattebo close, but Skattebo lost a lot of draft capital from what we have here mocked, falling an entire round behind to the Vikings, and that's definitely a murky landing spot. But Kaleb Johnson to the Commanders, very high-powered offense, the ability to come in and I think steal the RB1 role away from Brian Robinson, probably has a much higher ceiling. I think he profiles as a 3-down back. And I think a lot of people are really excited about Jaden Daniels, that Cliff Kingsbury offense. They just brought in Debo. Just an offense that's going to score a lot of points, win a lot of games, and that's what you want in a running back. So I'm going to kind of swing for the fences here. As I'm thinking about it more, I think the only other pick would be one of those quarterbacks. But I'm going to take the Kaleb Johnson to the Commanders here at 201. Brett, you are on the clock at 202. What are your thoughts here? And with the last few picks?
I guess, Kaleb Johnson, it's a good pick. I think the debate, so you have these back of the first, early second QBs left, and Jaxson Dart and Tyler Show.
I believe it's Tyler Shuck, like shucking. Like when you like shuck an oyster. Am I saying that right? But if that's the verb, right. But yeah, that's the pronunciation that I've been hearing.
Yeah, that's gonna get butchered a bunch, huh? I feel like the logical answer is to say Jaxson Dart if it's a first-round QB. Especially with the current Browns lineup right now, you don't really have a superstar QB. Like I would feel more confident about Russell Wilson staying the QB and Tyler not getting that starting. I'm not even going to try Tyler Shuck not getting the starting job than Kenny Pickett or Flacco being the QB and Jaxson Dart. The only reason I say that, not really as much as the talent of Russell Wilson, but just it feels like Russell Wilson only goes places when he gets like verbal commitments that he'll be the starter, right? That just seems kind of like a Russ move. I'm also, I'm a Niners guy. I watched Russ like cook the Niners for like a decade straight, so I'll always remember him being like an elite QB. I should say Jaxson Dart, but screw that.
What does your heart say?
My heart says Cam Skattebo.
Wow.
I'm just kind of like at this point in the drafts, Colston Loveland is the other one, but you heard my rant about tight ends. I wouldn't hate taking Colston Loveland here. There's the top tier talent I think is gone, and I think taking a swing on Loveland is fine. But the landing spot to the Colts is just so bad. I'm like not really interested in waiting 3 years for a breakout for Colston Loveland. I'd rather take Cam Skattebo, and sure, the Vikings have two good running backs in my opinion. I think Cam Skattebo I think he can jump them both, and I think he's a workhorse running back. And I don't really care if there's Dylan Sampson going to the Cowboys ahead of him.
And that's what I was going to ask. Did you consider Dylan Sampson at all? Say your team need is running back. You're just like, hey, I'm one running back away. I have a couple names here that are early in the second. Did you consider Sampson to the Cowboys at all?
Totally think that is a fine pick as well. On top of so I think Jaxson Dart, Colston Loveland, Dylan Sampson, Cam Skattebo. I think those are the options I would be considering. Honestly, I'll even say Devin Neal too. Chase Brown is a good running back, but and I was high on Chase Brown when he got drafted because I thought Joe Mixon was getting a little bit old and washed, but Chase Brown is not a stud workhorse running back either. And this running back class, you hear it from me, you hear it from the scouts, you hear it from college analyzers, you hear it from other fantasy football podcasts. It's about as deep as we'll find. I just think Cam Skattebo, I think he is someone that you watch. I'm not a big college football guy, but I watched a few games. He was a monster. I'm taking him. I think he's going to find a way to be the RB1. I think he's too talented to keep off the field. I think Aaron Jones is a great running back that's a little bit older, and I think Jordan Mason is a good bruiser that works in a great system when it's a good fit. Like I said, I'm a Niners guy. I watched it work great with him. But I think Skattebo, I think he's just he's got that dog in him, and Brendan and I, we always say we like to kind of pick our guys.
I was gonna say
so
this.
I'm gonna reach for Skattebo here.
Yeah, before I pass it off to Brendan, I was going to say this feels like a pre-draft rankings pick, and one of those, if you guys are following Dynasty the last couple of months, is that this is such a strong running back class that, say, Hampton, Henderson, and Judkins weren't there, then Skattebo might be the RB3, the RB4, and getting that better draft capital. So it's only because the class is so deep that he's fallen here to the early fourth round, and there are a lot of RB needy teams. So probably drafting on talent. I would still be leaning draft capital and some early second rounds. I mean, we still have a first round quarterback here on the board. But with that in mind, Brendan, what do you feel about the Skattebo pick? The Brett.
So I really like the theory of it. I think my thought with these running backs is, to be honest, everything under Judkins is kind of pick your guy. Like, pick your landing spot, pick your guy. And with Skattebo falling to the fourth, he would be my next guy. But with him falling to the fourth, I don't know if he would be the next on my board. So I would probably wait or trade back and kind of pick whoever fell, because I think you're kind of looking at, or maybe try to get 2 hits in this spot if someone's really looking for someone at this position. Like, personally, if I was in this draft right now, I would reach out to Arjun and I'd say, Arjun, you want to draft a quarterback? How about you come up?
Third one. I want a third quarterback.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but they're not all ours. You got to assume you're just drafting in a vacuum in that spot, right?
No, that's true.
Yeah.
He's a sucker for value, so he'll definitely want it. But I'm not taking a quarterback here, Sanford. That's just not what I do. So they're gonna stay.
He refuses.
He does. He refuses.
It's honestly, I'll be honest, if Milroe was still on the board, I would consider it. But I just have no interest in a quarterback going to a bad organization. Like, look what happened to Bryce, 101, bad organization, fell. Look what happened to every quarterback that's gone to the Browns. They just fail. I think the hit rate is just not great for quarterbacks that go to specifically these 2 teams, to be honest. So I'm probably out on both of them, like full out, to be honest.
Okay.
So I think the pick here, I look a little bit deeper in there's the options for some of those running backs, but I think I would wait a little bit. And then, I'm a big spreadsheet guy, so I love Tre Harris, but I'm not going to make that pick right now. So I think that I probably would have to go Luther Burden here. Coming in wide receiver 2 for the Jags, has an opportunity to grow and get better and develop. And I think he's already fallen probably a little bit too far for me to pass up the pick.
No, I think that makes sense. Once again, I talked about him being the wide receiver 5. I do think we just lost Brett. I'm going to give him a couple minutes, maybe shoot him a text here to let you guys talk out these next 2 picks. But I think Luther Burden is the wide receiver 5. I think you do see a big tier break here. In a lot of rankings is where you're going to start to have a mix of guys, Higgins, Knoll, Bech, Kyle Williams, and they're all ranked very similarly. And then based upon that, it would be certainly based upon landing spot, draft capital. But Luther Burden just feels like an absolute stud, feels like a yak guy, almost like a mini Deebo Samuel. Hey, we got Brett back. Thanks for joining us. But I think that's a great spot. I think we were still drafting on talent here, where you don't want to be drafting on landing spot with some of the guys still on the board. I think once you get into the 3rd round, you can say, okay, this guy went to this offense, and that makes me more optimistic. But when you have a guy like Luther Burden on the board, it's really hard to pass that up.
Trevor Lawrence can throw the ball about 7 yards, so maybe that's a really good fit for him.
Well, that's the thing, is like we just went in this whole bit about CJ Stroud earlier. Like, what is Trevor Lawrence able to support as a quarterback?
I think at this point, I'm looking for, if I get a wide receiver 2 out of the early 2nd round, I feel really good. So if he can support, Burden as, the wide receiver 20, wide receiver 18, I feel fine with that pick in the early 2nd. And then I think Burden is an athlete who does have the upside, who will give you those performances that matter in fantasy. So maybe he's a wide receiver 2 and finishes as the 22, but maybe he has, 3 weeks where he scores 35 points or like 28 points because he takes a couple to the house. So I think those sort of players are the players, especially if you're in a double flex type situation. You can just plug him in. You have a floor, but you have the potential to win your week with kind of an auxiliary player. So.
All right, Arjun, let me get your thoughts on these last couple of picks and who you have in mind for the 204.
I don't hate any of these picks. I think the only thing I'm talking about is, again, with Burton, is just you're going to a pretty crowded room. Even looking at the group now, there's a lot of talent in a lot of weird places still. So I'd be looking at the TCU receivers between Bech and Williams. They're both going to potentially really great situations. I think that Seahawks wide receiver room would be the whitest wide receiver room since like the 60s. If you had Bech, Kupp, and Bobo chilling with MVS.
That's
But
right.
I think MVS is ultimately like beatable for that wide receiver 2 spot. And then the Bills are the Bills. There's always an opportunity when Josh Allen is your quarterback. I think I just got to go with Bech just because I know the opportunity's there. The Seahawks aren't going to be great, and Sam Darnold, he may not win you a ton of games, but at least we know he can throw the ball. So he was able to support Jefferson and Addison through solid years last year. So at the very least, in the middle of the second round, you're going to get a guy with some boom bust, but maybe not sustained performance at least year one.
It's really interesting to hear you guys talk about these players. We've all been doing our own research the last couple months, and because I feel a lot differently, especially based upon the landing spots. Like I would see Jalen Milroe to the Packers 2 picks after as a guy who has the potential to be the wide receiver 1. So there does seem like an opening there. I mean, they're looking for that alpha wide receiver. We still have Higgins to the Titans at 35. He certainly has a lot of opportunities where, once again, he only has to beat out Treylon Burks, and there's a rookie wide receiver coming in, so a lot of opportunities. You actually mentioned Luther Burden in a crowded wide receiver room. I would disagree. Outside of Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, who is it? Parker Washington, Diami Brown, Brenton Strange. None of those guys are really someone that I'm getting excited about. I think there are a couple of dart throw picks, the end of your bench, you're hoping have an opportunity to break out. I'm going to make this easy, and I was hoping you would make it even easier for me. And I still got 2 quarterbacks on the board. It is a super flex draft, so between Dart and Tyler Shuck, you could talk about Colston Loveland, but I'm not going to take a first-round tight end over a first-round quarterback in this instance. And I'm going to go with Jaxson Dart to the Browns. First-round draft capital we have here, the mock, the Browns trading back into the first to get that 5th-year option. Travis Hunter becomes his wide receiver 1. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman. A lot of people got excited about David Njoku, so I think there's a lot of weapons there. And although we've been kind of talking about it over and over again about the Browns and the Giants like to recycle quarterbacks every couple of years, I just think the talent is there. And the opportunity is there to at least give him a shot for a few years. Certainly he has the potential to be a quarterback too. I don't quite see Jaxson Dart overall with this just being a weaker quarterback class as ever really becoming a top 10 quarterback, and going into that quarterback 1 situation. But in a super flex draft in the middle of the second, if you can get a guy with first round draft capital, I would be really excited about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and lock in Jaxson Dart here at the 205, make it easy. And I'm going to pass it off to Brett with the 206.
Yeah, I think that makes it easier for me. I think 206, not even thinking twice, I'm taking Dylan Sampson, running back to the Cowboys. I think, to sound like broken record, deep running back class. This is a day 2 pick going to a team that I think Javonte Williams is the projected lead back. Who I don't hate Javonte. I think maybe 1 or 2 years out of injury, maybe he's a little bit better. But I'm still going with the upside that comes with the day 2 running back pick to a great offense. Their offensive line is still good. QB is good. They're going to score points, and I like Dylan Sampson as a prospect too. It seems like he's a good player. Really, only other person to consider. I think this is where I would start saying, like, yeah, I'm not opposed to taking tight ends. I'm shocked. Colston Loveland. Actually, I shouldn't say that. If he goes to the Colts, I could see him slipping this far because that's not really the ideal landing spot from a receiving stand. But all that being said, giving Dylan Sampson, I think this is a pick where if I can get a day 2 running back drafted by the Dallas Cowboys at the 2.6, I would be ecstatic. I would be jacked up because you're talking about like that's RB1 potential if he can win the workhorse role, and then even then if he just becomes like a 60-40 split type of guy, like if you can get an RB2 type of guy as a rookie, that's a big one too.
Yeah, I think you're drafting for the upside with that pick. You mentioned Loveland might be the safer pick, but we've been talking about tight ends where it takes a few years, and who's going to be throwing him the ball? Is it Anthony Richardson, who won't even be able to get him the ball, or is it Daniel Jones, who you're not excited about? And Loveland is somebody who has the talent, but it might take a couple of years. So I just think with that draft capital, you could be excited here, but once again, the idea of Dylan Sampson to the Cowboys, not a lot of competition, a high-powered offense, really has the ability to come in and win the job in training camp and be the RB1 all the way through. There's certainly a lot of upside with that pick, so I cannot argue against that. Yeah, Brendan, do you have what are your thoughts on the Sampson pick? And I'd be pretty shocked to see you take a quarterback here. I think you passed on a QB at every opportunity today.
Yep, definitely not taking a quarterback, but I like it. I mean, I think that there's still a lot of, honestly, everything from pretty much here to the end of the round, I think is get your guy. If I was in a real draft again, this would be an opportunity to get a couple picks in here and get a couple shots, because I think there's a lot of potential here. And obviously, we all know what a kind of back of the second hit rate is like. So I would draft, pretty much to get your guy. I like the running backs that are left on the board. I think we've talked a little bit about Devin Neal and that backfield being open for someone who can take a little bit more of a workload. I think that, some of the wide receivers available are very exciting. Still Jalen Milroe, and I don't think the Packers want to run with an alpha, to be honest. So I think they like this kind of split of just spreading the target around, but he does have an opportunity where he could potentially take over there. I think I'm going to go a little bit deeper down because I see things pretty even across the board here, and I'm just going for ceiling here, and I think I'm going to go with Tre Harris. Yards per route numbers are insane, and I know there's a couple kind of weird things with that college offense. I'm not a big college football guy, so I just am regurgitating what I read as far as the offense, but I've heard don't trust on everything there. But I look at, over 5 yards per route run, and he's high both against man and zone. Someone who can beat zone as a rookie wide receiver in the NFL is really a superpower for a wide receiver. Look at Puka, someone like Ladd, someone who can demand targets from their quarterback, even if their quarterback's going to be a rookie, which I don't love. Honestly, if the landing spot was a little bit better, I probably would have taken him earlier. So,
yeah, that's interesting. Tre Harris, if you look at his metrics, it's something like he breaks all calculators in comparison because of the numbers that he put up. It's similar to Harold Fannin Jr., another tight end that we'll probably talk about here when we wrap things up. That I think somebody would be really excited to take in the 3rd round. I'm still pretty shocked that Jayden Higgins is on the board. I mean, you're taking a guy selected almost 60 picks later. To the Saints. Both would have rookie quarterbacks in that situation, but once again, as you mentioned before, this is the time of the draft where you got to call your shot, you got to go and get your guy. 208 Arjun, what are you thinking about that, and what do you still have left on the board?
Yeah, it's Samson would have been my guy. if he had fallen this far. So thank you, Brett. I was just looking back at my last pick. If it was the same team, I probably would have tried to stack Ward and Higgins as kind of an all-in on that offense. It's not really what I want to do now, but look at this. I think I have to go and get the value guy in Loveland. Um, the thinking here would just be it's an investment in talent. The 14th pick, so they clearly want to use him. That would probably tell me that Pittman had some really weird back issues last year, and he was their safety valve guy. So if they draft a big body in the first round, tight end or receiver, I'm hoping to steal all those Pittman targets.
Absolutely. No, I certainly like that pick. First round draft capital, 14th overall. They would absolutely have a plan for him. Shane Steichen is kind of an offensive guru. He just has to find his guy. A lot of competition for targets there, or excuse me, a lot of availability or openings for targets. I think Alec Pierce was the target leader. We even have Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, but no one that really gets me super excited. I think there's just so much uncertainty around that offense, and Loveland would seem like a piece that would be there for a long time, kind of established. Certainly in the tight end room, there's no competition for targets. Yeah, I'm gonna keep us going. So we each have one more pick. I'm on the clock at 2:09. You guys are making this really tough for me because I thought you guys might take the last couple of guys that I have. I'm still going to be going off of draft capital, and the talent. Like I have Jayden Higgins right now as my wide receiver 6 to wide receiver 8, being drafted 35th overall, and the wide receiver. I think that would be the wide receiver 5, once again, even taken above Luther Burden. So I'd be between Higgins and Tyler Shuck. To the Giants, Brett brought up a good point that it's unlikely, I think, that Shuck gets in year 1. I think Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are going to be those guys. So do you want to invest in a quarterback that you might have to wait a year on but has a target in Malik Neighbors? And maybe if you have a taxi squad, that would be a perfect opportunity in a super flex league. Or do you go Jayden Higgins, a guy who's going to be able to slot in day 1 as the wide receiver 2 for the Titans? If I look at the board, none of the tight ends in Arroyo or Taylor get me excited. I think Harold Fanta Jr. would be a great third-round pick, but not somebody I'm going to reach this early, especially to the Chiefs and Travis Kelce. They just re-signed Noah Gray. I wouldn't be taking a fourth-round running back, although it is a deep running back class. Bengals, Steelers, a couple of good landing spots and some opportunities. But I would be between Higgins and Shuck for sure. And, oh man, I already took Shedeur Sanders. I'm going to go.
You should draft like you're in a vacuum.
That's what I know.
It doesn't matter if you took Shedeur.
I'm trying to think.
He's just trying to talk himself out of
I'm
Shuck.
trying to talk myself
he
out of
knows.
Tyler Shuck because I think in a super flex league, I would lean the quarterback here. I'd be interested to see kind of what the team says, but an older quarterback who is likely to sit a year anyways. Are the Giants even going to be good? Do they end up having a top pick next year in a much stronger quarterback class? And if Shuck doesn't get the opportunity to play in year 1 because he doesn't show it, do they just move on again next year? So I'll go ahead and talk myself into Jayden Higgins to the Titans, a guy that can really grow with Cam Ward. Calvin Ridley also doesn't really get me excited. I think he's a name that people are hoping continues to break out, but is a lot older than I think people think. And once again, Treylon Burks is no one to get excited about. So Jayden Higgins being drafted in the same draft class as Cam Ward, an opportunity to kind of develop over the years. I think that would be my pick here at 209.
Can I bring up just real
go
quick?
for it.
Going back to Tyler Shuck, if you think he's going to wait a year anyway,
Why Shuck over Will Howard?
I mean, do you not think that Will Howard's going to wait a year for Matthew Stafford?
Oh, Will Howard's definitely waiting a year.
Yeah.
But so what's the benefit of Shuck over Will Howard if they're both waiting?
I mean, I definitely have Shuck as a higher pre-draft ranking. I think Shuck and Milroe are probably competing in that 4 or 5 QB spot, and then even here in draft capital, almost 60 picks ahead. does Matthew Stafford want to come back? And if you're comparing weapons, they're very similar. Giants have Malik Neighbors, Rams have Puka Nacua. So I would still be leaning pre-draft rankings, draft capital, just the combination of that to lean Tyler Shuck. The age doesn't get me too concerned. I mean, that was a big complaint about Michael Penix last year, but I think now people have almost forgotten about that. Quarterbacks play so much longer in their career, and in Dynasty, it's really you really can't be thinking more than 2 or 3 years out. So the thought that taking a quarterback and he's going to have a 10 or 12-year career, you really can't think that way. So I think in a vacuum, simply pre-draft rankings, draft capital, weapons are very similar. I would definitely be having Tyler Shuck over Will Howard in this situation.
I'd be biased towards the guy that just won a championship.
Team around him was great. I mean, that's the whole thing about Stetson Bennett from Georgia. Everybody was like considered one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time, but never won a Heisman, had a great team around him. Obviously hasn't done enough to prove anything out to being an NFL quarterback. I didn't see anything from Will Howard that really made him jump off the page, so to speak. So the floor is open. What are your guys' thoughts?
All
Brad,
these
you got the
QBs
pick at
suck.
210.
All these QBs suck. You're just wasting picks on them. Like,
Yeah, that's how I feel.
like there's so many. Yeah, I don't know.
It is a weak.
It
is a weak quarterback class. So I think that's the thing where a lot of these names are getting pushed up the board. I mean, they even talk about, I think last year's class, Cam Ward would have been the QB6. Shedeur Sanders would have been the QB7. It's only because of the team needs at this point that you're seeing the names move up the board. And in a super flex draft, it gets very enticing to say, man, I can get a guy who was drafted, third pick of the second round. Seems like the Giants, it would be an opportunity that he can start maybe at the second half of the season, certainly going into next year when they move on from Russ and Jameis. But as I mentioned before, is the talent even there? Do they even give him an opportunity to start a year from now? If they suck and they have another top 5 pick next year, do they just prefer to move on? It's really tough to say. Often quarterbacks seem like a safer investment, but yeah, we've certainly been hearing that this is a weaker quarterback class overall. So I don't blame anybody who just wants to pass and take a second round wide receiver, take a 4th round running back who in your rankings is a lot safer into a much better landing spot to have an opportunity to compete, especially if you don't want to wait a year. I think that's the thing I mentioned. If you have a taxi spot, you're in the back of the second, your team's already looking pretty good. You made the playoffs last year and you just want to take a shot on a guy who a year from now could pay off. I wouldn't blame you one way or another.
Yeah, I think it's a fundamental. I think quarterbacks haven't really been a safe investment. And maybe this is just, I've been playing Dynasty since, 2019, 2020. I don't even know when I started, somewhere around there. But went through that whole class in 2021 that had Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones. Who else was in that class? There were 5 of them.
Zach Wilson?
Lamar.
Yeah,
Zach Wilson. And how many of those guys are you happy? And that was, Brad, you remember that. That was talked up as like one of the best quarterback classes ever. And how much do you want any of those guys on your roster
Outside
right now?
of Lawrence and maybe Fields, nobody.
And you maybe want them as like low end 2s. So that I think quarterbacks are safe in the right situation and with the right draft capital. But I think a lot of times these quarterbacks that are bad get pushed up. They get sent to terrible situations, and then they just lose value almost like year 1, year 2. Honestly, the best thing they can do is like a Jordan Love or a Michael Penix or something like that, where they sit a couple years and they actually retain value. Because otherwise, when they go in and Zach Wilson, you can't get rid of them fast enough. So
I agree. Well, Brett, you're on the clock at 210 with the last pick. Last pick of this mock draft for you. You can give me your thoughts about the last few picks. I definitely want to hear your thoughts about who's left on the board and the decision that you're trying to make right now.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, if Jayden Higgins was on the board, he probably would have been my selection. There's still some players that I really like. I think Devin Neal could take over the job from Chase Brown. I think Ollie Gordon with the Steelers can be the bruiser that Arthur Smith loves in his offense. This running back class, like we said, is deep, and I'm definitely looking at, if I'm picking at kind of the back of the second or early third, I'm looking at situations. I feel like one thing I've learned over the years with Dynasty is draft capital used to be like the easiest way for me to draft, and so much of it now is like you got to look into the details. Like I look at let's talk Superflex and Tyler Shuck, right? All right, so say the Giants suck and they move on from Russ, and Tyler Shuck is the QB for the last few years, last few weeks, and he does okay, and the Giants still finish with like a top 5 pick. The Giants are taking a QB like with that pick, but like he's not lasting, right? It's like you gotta look at every situation, and I think understanding all of that, I'm still going back to the principle of this is a deep running back class. Devin Neal and Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon, if you don't know, was like an absolute monster 2 years ago, and this year kind of had a letdown. I don't hate him. Devin Neal, I think I think Chase Brown is a good running back, but I think he's kind of honestly, Chase Brown and Warren, I feel like are very similar types of running backs. And I think it's a similar situation. I think Devin Neal is a more talented prospect. And I'm going to take Devin Neal here. I'm just going to keep eating up and gobbling up these running backs, baby. They keep falling.
Yeah, you've taken the last 3 running backs with your picks. And I don't hate it. Once again, when I think you brought up a good point where back of the second, especially in the 3rd round pick, you just need to take your guy. Landing spot plays a factor because you're going to start to get into those tiers where everybody's ranked so similarly. You're going to have 5 or 6 wide receivers within the same tier, 3 or 4 running backs within the same tier. It's much earlier in the beginning of the draft to have, I like Hampton over Henderson or Judkins, whatever it is. But when you get into these 3rd, 4th, and even later round picks, landing spot does play a factor. Opportunity plays a factor. I mean, DJ Giddens only taken a couple of picks after. I have no interest in taking the guy behind Saquon Barkley. It doesn't seem like he's going away anytime soon. He's certainly not an opportunity where you can go in and win the job. So no, I like the breakdown that you had there between Neal and Gordon. And I think at the end of the second, it makes a lot of sense.
To add one more thing, Sanford, like understanding like the strengths of the class are so important. Because like last year, for example, if there was a day 3 running back, I wasn't touching him, and because I knew the running back class was so weak. It was kind of, you had, I think last year there was, you had Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, and that was kind of like that group. Like Devin Neal would be in that group most likely. Those guys were all, pretty coveted, and people were like, oh, I'm excited about them. Kind of early day 3 or day 2 picks. Just because someone's pick 119, 123 is running back in this class, it doesn't scare me because the running backs are so deep. These teams, they're playing opportunity costs. They're waiting on these picks because they know that they have another good running back next round that they can target, even if they don't reach for an early one. It was like last year, the wide receiver class was so deep. You had like those second, or who was in the second? It was our guy Keon Coleman, who he hasn't really been a hit. Lad McConkey.
Pearsall? No, he was in the first.
What did you say?
Pearsall was in the first. Never mind.
Pearsall was in the first, but like Lad, I think it was Lad, Keon, and Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette was actually 32nd.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those guys, we're still, Xavier and Keon are flirting with maybe not being the best picks, but you got to know that that's a deep class. Those players are getting pushed down. So like I look at Keon at pick 34 is not the same as Jayden Higgins at pick 35 in this class, because this rookie wide receiver class is not as good as last year. So really kind of understanding what the strength is of the class is an important thing to know, because draft capital, while it's the easiest way when you're first starting with Dynasty to draft, it's not really as straightforward as you might think the more you look into it.
Now you brought up some really good points there. I'm going to agree with you. And I'm going to just make it easy and pass it over to Brendan at 211 with your last pick of the mock draft. Let you kind of summarize your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess like a thought outside of this, it's really interesting doing a draft this way because I think the way I draft when I have 4 picks that I get to take or 3 picks that I get to take credit for a round versus when you're kind of drafting when you have 1 pick around, you do definitely draft very differently. Like I think I'd be much like here if this was me in the back of the second, I think that Harold Fannin would be on the board for me because I think you have a potential difference maker at tight end who gets to learn from a great going to a system that is already built for someone to step in, right? And he's a guy who looks the part. He works hard. He's got kind of some Kelsey-esque traits to him. So I think there's definitely like there's a situation where I would reach that deep and grab, especially if I didn't have 3rd-round picks. He'd be a guy I would like maybe not want to leave the draft without. I think if I'm thinking on like what I would do in this position typically is I would probably the pick, and I don't really know how to pronounce his name, to be honest. Elic.
Go for it.
Elic Ayomanor, however his name. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think it's
He's the Stanford kid, right?
Yeah, he's the Stanford guy.
I'm
But
not
I
gonna
like-
try. Go for it, Brendan.
Yeah, I like the landing spot. I think that I think that the Broncos are kind of ripe for someone to come in and take over as the one. I think that's sadly I don't think Troy Franklin's going to do it. But there's a decent team there that's young and exciting, and he has the potential to do some big things. So I think you have the potential for some good upside with the back of the second pick. That, to be honest, everything from here on is pretty much less than 50-50 gamble anyway. So that's kind of where I lean, and that's my same reason that I would maybe go for Harold Fannin is because again you're gambling here, so you want to gamble with someone you believe in or a situation you believe in.
You certainly want to draft for upside. Harold Fannin just blew all the metrics away in college last year. He put up better numbers than Warren and Loveland. So to the Chiefs would certainly be exciting. I think anytime somebody goes to the Chiefs, and I think in this mock it's the only fantasy player that the Chiefs take in the first 4 rounds. So bringing in a new weapon. Once again, I mentioned earlier the age of Travis Kelce and potentially his fall off. Do they feel like he's the next guy up over a Noah Gray, a Jared Wiley? Does he kind of fit into that role a little bit better? So with 212, Arjun, I'll let you kind of summarize your thoughts, and then I'll go ahead and wrap this up for us.
Yeah, this is a really difficult exercise, mostly because the teams are pre-assigned. So you're assuming after the draft, before the draft even happens. So there's all these things that you're kind of like, why would they do that? And I talked about it a little bit in the last pick, like the Colts going and grabbing a tight end at 14. That tells me something about their roster that maybe isn't true right now about Michael Pittman. And so it's very interesting to kind of guess at the intentions, which are really important when it comes to assessing someone's fantasy value. The intentions of the team are almost more important than the talent of the player because opportunity is king. That being said, with the 2.12, the 2 guys I'm looking at are Savion Williams, just as the opportunity to be the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo. It's a complete crapshoot. I don't know that anyone is really a guarantee in that spot. I would normally think Keon Coleman, but again, he underperformed a little bit last year. And then the other guy would be Ollie Gordon. I think they would get a lot of shit in this group for taking 2 Steelers with the 1.12 and the 2.12. And it ends up being your team composition. If you're trying to win now, you probably want Gordon because he's going to get guaranteed reps in this situation versus Savion Williams is just a straight up gamble that he has good rapport with Josh Allen and is going to outperform the rest of the guys. So I'll take Ollie Gordon with the 2.12.
All right, and just like that, we have completed our 2-round mock draft. I'm going to go ahead and just summarize this. I'll talk about some of the remaining guys on the board, and then I'll pass it off to each of you to give kind of 30 seconds or maybe up to a minute to give your final thoughts. But at 301, it would be very easy for me to pick Jalen Milroe. He's somebody that I have as a top 10 wide receiver in my pre-draft rankings. He would be drafted as a top 10 wide receiver. Middle of the second round draft capital to the Packers would be really exciting, an opportunity to kind of be that next guy up. Brendan brought up Harold Fandon Jr. I definitely like that name over Elijah Arroyo or Mason Taylor, simply for a fantasy factor. I think Arroyo and Taylor fit into maybe that more traditional tight end role, but you really have to be careful, with the tight ends, and you want the pass-catching tight ends. You don't want the traditional, the end of line, the blockers, things like that. So based upon team needs, it makes sense that the Jets or Broncos might take those particular players, but I think Harold Fandon to the Chiefs would be my third tight end off the board. You guys basically cleared out the running backs here. Trying to even think. We mentioned DJ Giddens doesn't quite have the opportunity to in Philly. Trying to think about if I look at the other names on the board, and so RJ Harvey, Damian Martinez. This is probably where you're getting into, once again, those much wider tiers where you're going to have 5, 6, 7 guys similarly ranked and very small margins between. So you're probably going draft capital or landing spots, especially when you're getting into guys drafted 5th, 6th, 7th round. It's unlikely you would be taking an undrafted free agent anywhere in the second round with how deep this class is. And then quarterbacks, we left Tyler Shuck on the board. We left Will Howard and Quinn Ewers on the board. We already talked about how this is a weaker quarterback class, and I don't want to say this being scared to take them, but we did talk through, does Shuck even get an opportunity to start this year? Do the Giants just move on and replace him next year if they have a top 5 or a top 10 pick in a much stronger quarterback class? So if you don't want to take the gamble on a quarterback that you're unsure of, especially a guy that's a little bit older, maybe take the running back, take the wide receivers in this much deeper positional class and just kind of move on. You're not stashing a guy for an entire year in Tyler Shuck, who, or even Will Howard, who it's very unlikely that they see a lot of action in year one. So that's my thoughts. I'm trying to think if anybody else really stands out to me when it comes to wide receivers. I think outside of Jalen Milroe, I don't see a lot of differences in these guys. Felton, Restrepo had a terrible 40 time. Jalen Royals is a name that I think a lot of people are excited about, but in this mock he slipped all the way to the beginning of the 4th round to the Lions. Not a lot of opportunity there behind Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams. So you really want to take a guy even in, say, I think Ty or Tay Felton to the Cardinals, who has a much better opportunity to be the wide receiver 2, even Kyle Williams to the Patriots, with really only competition being Stephon Diggs and none of those rookies from last year breaking out. Maybe a better opportunity on the Patriots. And that's what you're looking for in round 3 is maybe that draft capital, the landing spot where you have those pre-draft rankings, because it is so similar when you're starting to look at guys drafted between rounds, 4 and 6 and 4 and 7 and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and end my summary there. Brett, I'll start with you, Brendan, then Arjun. Brett, go ahead. Do you want to give me maybe a 30 seconds or a minute with your kind of parting thoughts about how this exercise went? And yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think the interesting thing is actually putting teams and picks to the players is honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I think it is a healthy exercise to do that, to see like how do you shift your mindset when certain players go certain locations. All that being said, I think really looking at the board, the only pick that I'm going to rip on is I just think Tyler Warren. My stance, if he were to truly be drafted by, the Bears, where there's not a great tight end, but a good tight end existing, one great receiver, one great prospect receiver in Odunze being the prospect, and DJ Moore being like the great receiver currently. And then also, like, I mean, I'll say it, like, you know, is Kaleb even like a for sure thing as a QB? Like, you know, he seems like he should be from the, you know, how talented he was. You see the potential, but, you know, historically, like, Brendan and I kind of ripped on him. Like, you look at these top 5 pick QBs, it's not as surefire thing as you might think it is. So I only go on that rant because I think Tyler Warren was so much fun in college football, and like, is he at best the third option on a team with a QB that you're not 100% confident in? And now are you waiting like years for this guy to truly break out? And and this just goes back to my rant of, you know, tight ends just are not something that historically work out in first round dynasty picks. That you are going to be disappointed more than you're going to be excited. So I would say people kind of should press pause on reaching for someone like Tyler Warren, and otherwise I'll stop making fun of Brendan's pick.
Well, Brendan, before I pass it off to you, we actually have a comment here in the chat that I want to get everybody's opinion on since we got a group here. We have a question about what are your thoughts on sending Chris Olave and Brandon Aiyuk for Devin Achane? Anybody have an initial
Olave and Brandon Aiyuk.
So two guys who possibly have some injuries. I mean, Olave is one concussion away from possibly his career being over. Aiyuk is recovering from a serious knee injury. Brett, as the 49ers fan, you could probably give us a little bit more insight on that, but I know he's not even projected to be available week 1. And then Devin Achane, who some people have as the RB1. I've seen that in rankings, a little bit surprising as me, but a top 5 dynasty RB, certainly a top 10, a guy that I think a lot of people are really excited about with high upside. But Brendan, why don't you go ahead and answer that question for us, or give me your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Achane side of that one. Aiyuk is a stud, but with that injury, you don't really know how he's going to come out the other side. And with how well Jennings performed last year, and then what Pearsall is supposed to do, and kind of what Pearsall was drafted to do, you're looking at a situation he comes back to where if he's not the same wide receiver, he could struggle. And Olave terrifies me. The concussions, it's kind of like the Tua situation, right? You just one hit and he could be done. And I don't think he's done enough in the league that I would say he's worth that risk. I mean, he is a air yards beast, but he's never really been more than like the wide receiver 18, I think. I don't know the actual numbers, but I would sit on the Achane side there. Yeah,
it's tough investing in a running back, but yeah, given a couple of wide receivers with some injury history. I just pulled it up quickly on Keep Trade Cut, everybody's favorite dynasty trade calculator. But Arjun, what are your thoughts on this deal?
I see why both teams did the deal. It's 2 question mark wide receivers for a 5'9", 185-pound running back. Achane is going to be really good next year. I don't doubt that. I do doubt it in 3 years.
I think that's investing in the running backs, and you only want to, I mentioned this earlier, see or think in a 2 to 3 year window. So I think if you're competing next year, Devin Achane makes a lot of sense. He's going to have the upside. Once again, I mentioned Brandon Aiyuk is even available until week 6, week 8, week 10. How long does it take to get back? Chris Olave sounds like not only the injury history of the concussions, but playing with the rookie wide receiver. I know personally I'm excited, playing with a rookie quarterback likely in Shedeur Sanders that we're seeing in a lot of our mocks. I'm certainly excited about the Kellen Moore offense, but I think based upon upside, would not be shy about Devin Achane. I think if you own Devin Achane, you would want to get if you own the wide receivers, I'd be trying to get even a little bit more than just Devin Achane, have the guy throw in a third or something like that. Certainly it's not much, and we each have our own opinions on what a third round pick is worth. But I think you could get a little bit more with some 2 wide receivers who have that potential upside. Although Devin Achane, as we see here, is the RB5. Brett, any thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, I'm taking Chris Olave and Brandon Aiyuk, and very by far. I think it just goes back to in 2 years, I think one of those two players will be better than Achane. And while, yeah, sure, maybe you're going for like the short-term win this year, you gotta value that kind of. I don't know. You said you kind of view things in like a 2-3 year window, Sanford. I might say like 3-4 year window.
Okay.
And I think Aiyuk is a little bit older than people may realize too. And you see right there, 27 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But Aiyuk, he's a workhorse. He will work his ass off to return from injury. I have confidence that he'll come back and he'll be like. I think he'll be like a wide receiver 2 at least for the next like 3 years once he returns from injury. He's just so crisp with his route running, and he fits the NFL prototypical receiver these days. And Olave, I think right now he's just at a low point with the concussions. He's still a great receiver, and he still has like shockingly good numbers when you look him up. All that being said, though, I'm all for like, hey, if you're trying to win now, man, you got to pay up. So like if you got Olave and Aiyuk and they aren't going to help you to the point where you want to win your league this year, go in and get Achane.
And I was going to say, I think that's the scenario. If you see yourself as a top 3 team and you really want to compete in 2025, I would not be afraid of going after Achane and putting your team over the top, because at the end of the day, it's fun to have some guys with potential, but Dynasty is all about winning championships. So if you don't see your team structure as wanting to compete and kind of push all those chips in, I think it's much safer to go with the wide receivers. A year from now, I agree. Both these guys are definitely going to have higher value. Aiyuk coming back from the injuries. Hopefully Chris Olave is another year removed from his injuries. What does Achane look? He's had his own injuries in years past. So it's kind of a coin flip, but I do think team situation, and as I mentioned, do you want to push all your chips in to get yourself over the top? But I do want to just transition back over here to our mock draft for the day. Brandon, you were going to give me your thoughts, kind of the summary of how you think everything went.
Yeah, I think in general, when I look at the third round, I think this pretty much went as I would expect. Some things were kind of a little higher or lower than what you would expect, but I think generally it went pretty well. I think when I look into the third round, the guys I'm looking at are Harold Fannin. You're gonna laugh. I actually would take Tyler Shuck in the third round, because third rounds are complete dart throws. So like, I've got a borderline first round quarterback. I'm not really wasting any opportunity cost by taking him. So I would probably take him there. Generally, I try to trade away every third round I have to any sucker who will take him. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I would be looking. Maybe taking another of the running backs that kind of are drafted even in the 5th round here, that I like the landing spot and maybe have a good path forward, kind of like an RJ Harvey type or something like that. But yeah, this was great and a really, really good exercise. I did also love that Brett's boy Treylon Burks caught at least 4 or 5 stray bullets throughout this draft, so that made me happy.
The fact that people are even still talking about Treylon Burks, I'm taking that as a win.
If you can get anything for him right now, I would, because a lot of mock drafts I've seen have the Titans getting a wide receiver in the 2nd, if not waiting until the 3rd. But they're looking for a wide receiver too. Now,
I'll trade you.
What'd you say?
I'll trade you Sky Moore for him, bro.
I'm good on that one. Now, Arjun, before I get your thoughts, I got one more question here in the comments. I'm not going to pull up a calculator or anything, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on Davante Adams. I've seen some rankings actually have him above Puka on the Rams as the true wide receiver 1. I certainly don't agree with that. I think he's a pretty safe wide receiver 2. I think he's somebody that you could probably guarantee to be, a top 24 wide receiver this year. He's going to demand a lot of targets. But if you were a win now team, would you be looking to move off from Davante Adams now with kind of that hype of this new team and the new potential? Or once again, if you're a win now team trying to compete for a championship in 2025, are you just holding the bag and just going to ride Davante Adams until the wheels fall off?
If I'm win now, I'm keeping Davante Adams. Where Matt Stafford's back goes, I go, but he can absolutely support 2 wide receiver 1s.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if he's 1B versus 1A, I think there's plenty of room in that offense for both Adams and Puka. And I think as long as Matt Stafford's the quarterback and he's throwing it like only Matt Stafford can, they'll get good stats.
Brett or Brendan, you guys have like a 10 or 15 second thought on Davante Adams?
Keep the studs, even if they're old. You'll never get what they're worth if you try and trade them away. People will always try and shortchange you. Just ride them out.
I think that's you're likely to get a second at best.
I'm with them on that. I personally have been trying to offload and did offload AJ Brown. Just kind of thinking, he's getting older. He's still kind of at the crux, but even someone that's turning the corner like that and starting to kind of fall off that super high performer value, you're just not getting what they are as far as value to your team back. So
a lot of really good points. I think, the value just won't be there. If you can swindle a first out of somebody. So I'm the type of guy who likes to do a pick swap where I'll do this player and a third for a second. So maybe if you feel like you're in the position or there's a guy on the board and you want to do Davante Adams in a second to move up into the first, I wouldn't hate that, mid-second to get into the mid to late first, especially when we talked about the tiers here and the guys that are available, and Egbuka to Golden to one of those slide. But I would say even in 2025, I like Davante Adams to outperform pretty much any rookie wide receiver. I can't see any of these wide receivers outperforming Davante Adams in 2025. So if you are a win now team, I think you just want to hold the bag and hope that Stafford doesn't hyper target Puka, which I don't think he will. I think Stafford's the traditional pocket passer. He's going to throw the ball and he's going to spread it around. So I think we brought up a lot of really good points. So with that,
remember you can always trade people during the season too. So it's kind of like why force it in if you have time to look at better options, right?
Yeah, I feel like to that point, I'm always under the strategy you should always be trying to win until the deadline, and then you make your decision. So like I would consider every team, because you don't know what's going to happen, right? You could hit on a couple rookies and you could completely turn it around. So I would, if I had Davante Adams and really wanted to get rid of him, even if I was a win now team, I wait till the deadline until someone's desperate for a wide receiver because of injuries, and then maybe you get that late first for him. But
all right, Arjun, let me get your final thoughts, kind of summary of the draft. Then we got one more comment on a trade I'll get your guys' opinion on before we close things out.
I think this was a really fun exercise. I think we need to try it again in 2 weeks and just see how different it is when we change all of our assumptions to the reality of who teams take. There's some really interesting players here. We talked about assumptions like Loveland, Golden going to the Cowboys at 12, and even some ideas like if the Steelers ended up taking Dart or Shuck with their first round pick, how much would that change how we react in this fantasy draft? So this is a lot of fun, and hopefully we can get together and do it in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it would definitely be a little bit nervous to draft with you guys, considering we're all in a league together. Once the landing spots play out, we might have to let our own rookie drafts play out before we get back on. But no, I agree. Once the landing spots are solidified, it'll be a lot more fruitful, especially for the audience, people who are still waiting for their own rookie drafts to give our own opinions. A lot of us have been playing Dynasty for many years now, so but this was great. Certainly the exercise, once again, of having the landing spots to go off of kind of helps fit where you're not just going off of pre-draft rankings. I got this guy wide receiver 6, I got this guy wide receiver 7. It makes you think a little bit more. So with that, I got one more kind of final parting thought. We have one more trade that came through the chat. I'll get your guys' opinion. This is on a win now team. We have Travis Etienne for Cooper Kupp. And I think personally, if this is a win now team, I mean, Keep Trade Cut actually has Travis Etienne. Doing this pre-NFL draft would make me a little bit nervous. I saw something recently actually that the Jags might take Ashton Jeanty at 5. Not even wait for him to fall to the Raiders or the Bears. Just go ahead and take the best player available. In that case, Travis Etienne would lose all value. We had mocked here to the Seahawks taking a couple of wide receivers or a wide receiver, and Arjun brought up a good point of maybe Cooper Kupp has some competition for the wide receiver too. But let's say in a vacuum, somebody says, I need a decision today before the NFL draft. If you're a win now team, which side are you taking? Let me just get like your 10 or 15 second thoughts.
Give me Travis Etienne. I think just it's higher upside. I'm with you where I wouldn't touch him until after the draft to make sure there's no running backs. But I find it hard to believe they spend an early draft pick on a running back when they got Etienne and Tank Bigsby. They got a good backfield, and it's so hard to get running backs in Dynasty, man.
Brendan?
I hate both sides, to be honest. I think if anything, I mean, Cooper Kupp was good on a per snap basis last year. He played with Puka in almost all of the games he actually played post injury, and he actually performed well, except in the fantasy playoffs. If I remember right, I might be speaking wrongly about this, but except in the fantasy playoffs, which is what people remember. I think he's still got a little bit left. I kind of like between these two players, I like Cooper Kupp better. I just feel like Etienne's on a downward spiral, but I would definitely want to get more for Etienne because I think he does hold higher value, and I wouldn't want to do this trade straight up.
Okay. And Arjun?
Give me Kupp. I don't like keeping the older back in a split backfield, and I'll take the reps with Kupp as a wide receiver 1 in Seattle.
Yeah, it sounds like based upon the comment that both would kind of be a flex piece anyway. So it's probably a team that's decently deep, and once again is a win now team. Obviously, if you're looking at either of these guys as an RB2 or a wide receiver 2, you're probably not built to win in 2025. But as I mentioned before, I think waiting until after the NFL draft to see how things play out makes a lot of sense. I think if the Jaguars don't take a day 1 or a day 2 running back, I would probably lean the Etienne side. I still think he's the RB1 over Tank Bigsby, and Cooper Kupp. I think this is very close. I don't think he's done. But Seattle and Sam Darnold don't get me really excited. JSN, which one of them actually plays the slot? What are those? Where's that best fit? So Etienne feels like the safer pick. Let's just go ahead and assume that Etienne's the RB1 and Kupp's the wide receiver 2. I think Etienne's going to give you more week-to-week production, where Cooper Kupp, you're going to see some good weeks, some bad weeks. Seattle itself isn't a team that I'm super excited about, really high-powered offense that kind of seem to be in this rebuilding phase. So, but it's interesting. We've all been given pretty different opinions on this. So once again, it kind of shows in Dynasty how team structure can play a lot, and everybody will just have completely different thoughts. So, all right, with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Just going to quickly shout out my Twitter page. If anybody out there is following along or watching, I encourage you, please follow along. Please like and subscribe, all those good things. I am a new channel, just trying to get this started, so trying to do weekly episodes all throughout the off season, posting on Twitter pretty regularly, doing these live streams on YouTube, doing reels to get people excited about the draft. So please like and subscribe, all those good things, and until next time, thanks for tuning in. So